Now, I suspect Daryl Prater. Oh gosh, Daryl, I think I have botched it up yet already. Well, I'd like to welcome you all to the Church Development webinar on how to increase weekly offertory before your fall capital campaign, or whether your participation in a capital campaign will begin this fall or in the future. And these components that we'll discuss today are based on a great deal of experience, and I'm very reliant on my coworker, Daryl Prater, which I attempted to set up as a co-presenter today. And Daryl, I know you're there. Unfortunately, you're not a co-presenter at the moment. So Daryl, if you could please text me questions and comments that arise. And if Daryl, you could also monitor the chat function and text me the questions that arise there. I'll have my cell phone right next to me, and I'll be able to gather in questions and comments and relay them to you. So we'll move pretty quickly through this action-packed agenda, and I do welcome your questions and concerns. Just use that chat function, or you can send me a text with your question, 816-560-3641. That's also on our website, and it's also in the previous campaign webinars that we've shared with you. Now you can share this webinar. We'll send you this recording as soon as it is done. And we have lots of other webinars as well to help you in your church capital campaign preparation. Go to our website, church-development.com, for tons of resources. We've got an action-packed agenda. We will cover why increase your weekly offertory before your church capital campaign, and when to start doing that weekly offertory building activity. And of course, the answer to that is as soon as possible, because everything that you do is a success. And fundraising is a lot like farming. And think of that shift from being hunters and gatherers to an agrarian-based society. When our species discovered you could plant a seed and water it, and in a couple of months you'd have nutrition. Well, fundraising is just like that. Everything that we do works. The problem that I encounter is that almost none of the churches that we work with abide by the ICSC golden rule for investment in stewardship, which is 2%. Do you invest 2% of your budget of your church in stewardship? If you do, you're at the gold standard. Most churches that we work with don't spend a penny, and they feel like they're being good stewards, but in fact, they're being like a farmer who refuses to water the crops. Farming works if you work the system. We'll also cover number 2, information that needs to be shared, and the kind of information that needs to be shared in order to increase weekly giving. Number 3, what's the impact of gratitude? Now, believe it or not, there's some real research on this. My favorite researcher is a person named Colbini, who wrote a book on influence. And 5 million copies of that book later, I feel like I found something worthy of sharing with you. We'll talk about engagement, and in particular, my coworker Daryl Prater is an expert in this regard, and I'll tell you about a couple miracles that he has produced. And then number 5, we'll talk about the role of stewardship inspiration and how that affects one's weekly giving. Church Development was founded in 1992. I know that means I'm an ancient fossil, but we've helped hundreds of churches raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and we've kept track of what works and what doesn't work. We're different from other church capital campaign consultants. We're certainly based in scripture, but we also add in that research and experience component. The ask is based in prayer and discernment, not door-to-door pressure. As a result, weekly giving increases for the next 3 years. We also stimulate the organs of generosity in terms of estate giving. So we launch a planned giving program, and immediately upon the conclusion of a capital campaign. And the norm is to raise as much in estate gifts as we do in the capital campaign as well. So we'll cover those things as well as we proceed. This is our favorite scripture. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. The idea there is kind of like career counseling. You know, we've all been blessed with something unique. It's important to discover that and act as a conduit for that. This is me. I've got over 30 years of experience. I've written a couple of books and had my academic research published in a journal. It's kind of a highlight of my career. I wrote this book, and we keep track of all the data from all of our campaigns. So I can really share with you in this book. Matter of fact, if you give me a call or an email, I'll send you this book for free. It's got a ton of wonderful case studies, so you can see what actually worked. You'll probably find a church similar to yours. We study, like number 4 and 5, we study non-church related resources. I'm a big fan of this person who got the Nobel Prize in economics. I've joined, of course, I'm a member of the ICSC, in addition, NACBA, the National Association of Church Gift Planners, AFP. So anyway, we gather information from all sources. So my goal is to equip you with resources to create an action plan to increase your weekly giving before you start a church capital campaign. So number 1, the first subject we're going to talk about is why. And the primary why is the greater your level of weekly giving, the greater the amount that you'll raise in your capital campaign. Now, we keep track of churches that do not do an annual campaign, and that's right at about half of all the 300,000 churches in this country. Half do not. Now, in the book Giving Matters, the authors have conducted research on the per capita giving level by denomination of churches that do annual campaigns and that churches that do not do an annual campaign. And the per capita giving is dramatically higher among churches that do an annual stewardship campaign. So please, if you don't do an annual campaign, please do one. Okay, I'll give you all the free information. Contact us. We have a system called the Stewardship System, which is based on this research that you can just take and download and implement. It's got solicitation letters, brochure templates, activities, campaign, calendar, agendas, committee guides, all that kind of stuff. You can just take it and implement it. So I want you to raise the maximum amount of money in your church capital campaign, and having a healthy annual stewardship effort is critical for that. Now, our goal in running a church capital campaign is 300% of annual giving. Whatever your annual budget is, multiply that times 3. Now, it's not a guarantee that you're going to do that. Here, I just got a text from Daryl. It says, make sure and tell the story about St. Anne's. Well, Daryl's kind of the rock star of our company, and he raised 7 times annual giving when he worked at St. Anne's Parish. And I would have to say that's kind of a normal thing for Daryl. He's kind of our rock star. It'd be normal for him to raise 5 times. As a matter of fact, we're about to cover a case study of a campaign that he ran, All Holy Spirit, which we had the best volunteer chairperson on the planet, John Burge, as our leader, where we raised over 6 times annual giving. But anyway, our goal is to raise this massive amount of money. And in addition, we want to increase annual giving by 10% per year. So the why is that increase in weekly giving has this ripple effect on the amount you can raise in your capital campaign. And then the next bullet, the planned giving and endowment, we want to ask everybody to include the church in their estate plans, and a greater level of involvement. And the weekly giving equates to a greater level of involvement in capital, annual, and planned gifts as well. Now, I portrayed on that picture on the right, one of my favorite campaigns of all time, Prince of Peace Parish in Kearney, Nebraska, with this fantastic pastor, Father Paul, who was just well loved by virtually everyone. And the man was just the energizer bunny rabbit of activity. And he had a finance manager, Cecilia, who was brilliant, just a CPA type who could, I'm sure, run a very large corporation. But they understood how important stewardship was. And we wove that in every one of our weekly meetings during running the campaign. And we engaged people deeply. And we not only saw an increase in giving before the capital campaign, we saw an increase in weekly giving after the campaign as well. These are kind of counterintuitive facts, but all you have to do is pay attention and be deliberate and implement these 5 factors that we're about to launch into, and it works. It's just like farming. You just have to work the system. When should you start? today, and you can start today. And here is how. The flow of information is absolutely critical. In the book, Why Catholics Don't Give, researchers at Villanova discovered a handful of factors that cause the Catholic denomination to be the leader in the lowest amount given to their church per capita. The average Catholic gives 1.2% of their income. The average Protestant gives 2.2%. Why is that? The number one factor is the flow of information. The author Charles Eck, being a very intelligent academic researcher, taught me a new word, and that word is obfuscation. He accused the average Catholic Church of obfuscating in regards to the finances. And obfuscation means hiding, basically not being clear about that. So the number one thing is to communicate clearly, where did my donation go? When you produce an annual report, it's got to show the finances. It's also got to show the human impact. It's vital that you prepare a functional budget, not a line item. Now, this church visitation, one of my favorite churches that I've ever worked with and attended, I managed a campaign there about 10 years ago. And I got to know very well their director of stewardship, Megan Berdowski, who is a brilliant woman. She could be a college professor to share what she has learned. She's kind of a role model in how to conduct an annual campaign. The cornerstone of their annual campaign is a really well done annual report. And it answers the question, where did my donation go? And it tells stories, it has pictures, it has case studies, it covers all of the details that one would be interested in, perhaps if one was an investor and going to invest there in a stock. So you really need to know the specifics of the finances. A line item budget does not do that. It's got to be a functional budget. So rather than have a line item and say salaries $500,000, it's so much better to say we have a $100,000 music budget, we have a $100,000 youth budget, we have an adult formation budget of $100,000. So it's the function that matters, not the line item. You do a functional budget, you can tell a story about what does RCA look like this year? What does our confirmation activities look like? What's adult education look like? That's what we're really investing in, not the line item we're paying a salary to a person. That itself is obfuscation. What are they doing? What human impact are they producing? And that's the key. Now, I think if you go to the Visitation Catholic Church in Kansas City, Missouri website, you can actually click and view one of their spectacular annual reports. And I'm sure Megan Berdowski would allow you to just replicate her system. She's a very generous and giving person, besides being brilliant. Okay, next subject, gratitude. Now, the picture here is St. Margaret of Scotland Parish. We have done 3 capital campaigns there. And Daryl Prater has run 2 of them, and he hit such a mega home run that it's just shocking. Gratitude flows right after the information. So the information tells people what happened. Then the next step is to say, thank you so much for volunteering. Thank you so much for giving. Here's what happened because of that. Now, in the book I mentioned earlier, Influence by Cialdini, he talks about the dynamic of reciprocity, and that being the first of his components of this scientific formula of influence. To thank them changes the whole dynamic. So here I have on my file cabinet right here just a sample of one of the gifts given away. This is a really nice Celtic cross. This is the kind of thing, you know, it has really no financial value, but it has a symbolic value. We want to give away a symbolic gift. I remember working at a church in Liberty, that was the name of the town, and they had the wind blow down a tree in the parking lot, So the pastor was fond of saying, God has provided the raw materials for our thank you gift. So there were a couple old men in the parish who chopped it up in their garages into little, 2-inch bricks, and then they sent them off to have laser engraved the logo of the church. And, no economic value, but the symbolic value was really fun. I remember walking through the halls one day after church, and I actually had a person stop me and say, hey, Dennis, we're all set to make our pledge. My wife and I were going to pledge $100 a month, so that's $3,600 for our 3-year pledge. I said, oh, that's great, thank you so much. He said, but if she pledged $150 a month and I pledged $200 a month, could we get 2 of those little wooden blocks? And I just did the math real quickly, and I realized that's just a lot more money than they were talking about in their first gift. And it was to get the little wooden block, which had an economic value of 0. So, of course, being a good servant, I said, I will talk to my people and I'll see what I can arrange. So it's amazing the most modest, gentle form of gratitude can have such an impact on how somebody thinks about their own giving. I was just sort of shocked. Now, I want to talk about St. Margaret's. Now, here you have the picture of their famous fish fry, and there on the left you see takeout orders. This is something they do every year, and everybody loves it, and it is really delicious food. Before their big campaign, they had a banquet this size for everyone at no cost. It was just an expression of gratitude and celebration. Now, it is no wonder that they had a 20% increase in participation in their annual giving. 20%. Now, what would happen if that happened to you in your church? If your annual giving went up by 20%? Isn't that remarkable? Isn't that incredible? And that is right in the moment where they raised more than 3 times annual giving in their capital campaign. Now, what would happen if you raised 3 times annual giving in your capital campaign and you had 20% more in your weekly giving? Kind of boggles the mind, doesn't it? Yeah, sure. I'm sure the banquet was expensive. I'm sure they spent $15 per person, and I'm sure it was tens of thousands of dollars. But if you could get that kind of return on investment, spend $20,000 and you get an additional $200,000 per year in annual giving, is it worth it? Heck yes, it's remarkable. So I encourage you to read the book called Influence by Cialdini. And the 6 factors, I'll see if I can memorize them. I try to make these acronyms: reciprocity, urgency, social proof, likability of the person who does the asking, authority. So there's got to be some academic, academic proof of that. And then S stands for social proof. So people, the people who were involved. So when you do, for instance, when you do a brochure, I mean, like this is a brochure, we've got pictures on the back that show all the volunteers that have been involved. And we've got lists of names of all the people who are involved as well. So you have to do the social proof as well. So those 6. Anyway, I get really excited about academic research and all the things that we can borrow from the world around us to help the churches be more effective. Okay, let me move off of gratitude to number 4, engagement. Now, I really like what happened at St. Charles. Also, Daryl played a very important role as a consultant in this activity, and it again was a home run in many different dimensions, but they did a superb job of engagement. And I want to be really specific about one particular thing that happened. They involved the entire parish in brainstorming the vision. They based the process in prayer. So this is a book by Henry Nouwen called The Spirituality of Fundraising. And in this, Nouwen points out that when one takes that spiritual approach to fundraising, you are inviting people into a process of discerning God's will in their life and in the life of the organization as well. And when you're at that point, you become unattached to the outcome because you're just seeking God's will. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, great. So we involve people in brainstorming the vision for this parish. And there was one project that was way, way out there. And it was so big and far out, it was difficult for a lot of people to grasp. And that was to knock down a current garage the Boy Scouts were using for storing things in, and need a lot of work, and build a community center at that exact site. And that was a big price tag. About, it was 80 or 90% of the parish was very much for it, and they could see how exciting it would be, but 10 or 20% did not like the idea. Well, rather than push it, the pastor returned to, we're seeking God's will, and when we have consensus, we'll move forward on the things we have consensus on. So they prioritized the project. After the brainstorming, they had a lot of small town hall meetings where they asked everybody to help us prioritize. And the new big idea got a lower level of prioritization. So we just said, well, if we raise that money, we'll put it in there. And if we don't raise that money, that's fine as well. We had tons of town hall meetings, lots of cheese and crackers and pop and beer and wine and community building activities. We did surveys, but then we were able to respond and say, here's what you said. So therefore, this is what we are going to do. Now, the result is big home run in the capital campaign. Annual giving goes up as well. So before you do a capital campaign, maximize engagement by asking people's opinion, ask them to help you prioritize activities for the fiscal year ahead. And if they do that, then annual giving goes up, weekly giving goes up, the capital campaign will be a success, and planned giving will go up as well. Now, I keep mentioning the book that I wrote. My wife accused me of writing this book so I can read it on a regular basis. She also accused me of making videos like this so that I can watch them on a regular basis. But I do like the book because it's got a lot of case studies in there. So if you read it, you will see here are what different churches did to implement the engagement concept. Okay, we're almost done. We're going to move to number 5. This is one of these record-breaking campaigns that Daryl Prater has run that just turned out fantastically. And the concept is stewardship inspiration. It was very interesting. About 30 years ago, the Catholic Church produced a pope, the encyclical on stewardship. And it was just fascinating because there was a quote from a person who's no longer a bishop. I can't remember the exact date of the quote, but the Pope said, the best teachers about stewardship might not be the pastor. It might be lay speakers. Now, statistically, we have found that that is actually the truth. So you might have a marvelous pastor, you might be a marvelous pastor, but the best thing you can do is to monthly have lay speakers tell their story about stewardship. That's 3 minutes we give them, and we give them 3 questions, and they've just got to answer those questions. And in this day of making videos and the simplicity and low cost of videos, we just tell them, take your iPhone, videotape yourself. And when you've got it done and you like it, send it to me. So we get volunteers from the stewardship committee to do this, and then we spread out and ask people. And sometimes churches feel comfortable having a lay speaker at front during announcements telling their story. Sometimes they don't, and it's only video. And video is just fine because not only can we email it out to everybody, but we can put it on the church website under the section About Us, which is the second most visited page on the church website. And in there, if you've got a dozen of these videos of people answering these 3 questions, they're not sales pitch questions. They're all about spiritual discernment. Man, that becomes the best possible selling point when a church shopper visits your website. Now, I call it church shopper. It's coined by George Barna. I would encourage you to Google George Barna and examine 1 or 2 or 10 of the books that he has written. He coined the term church shoppers, and he has a really good understanding. And he's discovered some things that we need to pay attention to. He was the first person that I read that said denominationalism is dead. That's kind of a horrifying thought. He said the number one reason that people join a church is to meet their social needs. Isn't that interesting? So what are we doing to engage people? to connect people socially. I remember working at St. James Parish, and we had a woman who came up to me during the campaign and said, I want to be the leader of the social engagement committee. I said, well, really, usually that's hard to find somebody to lead. Tell me about your motivation. She said, well, I went to church here for a year before anybody said hi to me. I thought, oh my gosh, that's just the worst, most painful thing I can imagine. I'm sorry that you went through that experience, but thank you so much for volunteering so that that never happens to anybody ever again. Thank you so much for that. So she did, needless to say, did a marvelous job. Okay, let's go back to stewardship inspiration. Okay. All Holy Spirit, another Daryl Prater home run, 6 times annual giving. And he did it flawlessly. He made it look easily. Of course, we had a pastor give a sermon or two about stewardship, but really our focus was on lay speakers. And now I've got a bonus for you. Let me show you this next slide. It's this guy right here, John Burge, rock star. Maybe the best volunteer chair that we've ever had, maybe the best one on the planet ever. In any church capital campaign, he was just full of life and full of energy. And his central message was he's real happy to be a volunteer and be part of it because he's part of a miracle. It's just remarkable to raise that much money. They bought a big chunk of land and then they sold off a big chunk of that. And that ended up paying for a good portion of the entire church budget. And then had a bunch of generous people jump in to be part of this exciting thing. He was really good at addressing these 3 questions. And these are the 3 questions that we always ask all volunteers to answer when they're lay speakers. Number 1, how has God blessed me? And we're all different. And it goes back to that 1 Peter 4:10. So from the pulpit, they say, well, God has blessed me with this and this and this and this. I feel really blessed. Now, there's a concept called neuron mirroring, where when a person is telling a story, we involuntarily resonate with that and we find ways to connect with that. When the person up front is telling their story about what their gratitude, I as a listener am going to go through in my own mind what I am grateful for. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, how do I take those gifts and act as a conduit? How do I take those gifts and volunteer for things and give money to? Okay, and everybody's got a different story. Like I really like making donations to science. I've been a part of a nonprofit group that does it's called the Institute of Noetic Science, that does research on consciousness. I've been a donor since 1993, and they're in my will. They're very close to my heart. And I have good fortune to know the scientists, and I've even been parts of some scientific research. It's extremely fun. So everybody's got a different story. You know, what is it for you? What is it for your volunteers? When I talk about what I get excited about, what that stirs in other people is what they get excited about. And then the number 3 question that we want people to answer is, how did my life change when I realized I was a conduit for those blessings? Now, there's a book called Flourish, and in it, it's one of the followers of Maslow, and his hierarchy of needs. He talked about self-actualizations. Positive psychology is the field, and there have been a couple really good authors and researchers that followed Maslow. And this book Flourish talks about this item number 3, when people are in that state of mind of being a conduit. They are in a state of flow. This is a term coined by Mihaly, Csikszentmihalyi, and you can look up his book titled Flow. Whether they're a high jumper in the Olympics or they're herding cattle in Sweden, they have a sense of being connected, and time goes away, and they're in a heightened sense of joy. And that's what people who are generous experience when they're giving money and when they're volunteering. Now, for an additional nerdly source, I would encourage you to take a look at the book Give to Live by Gregory Lawson. And in there, he cites a study that has identified people that give away more than 2% of their income have an increased level of T cell production in their immune system. Isn't that fascinating? So it's not just a theory that giving is good for you, but now we can actually measure. The more generous you are, the greater your T cell production. Isn't that fascinating? I love that kind of stuff. So you get your volunteers to answer these 3 questions. And like John Burge, talk about how you have a sense of relationship with God. You are cooperative with God, seeking God's will, doing something that makes the world a better place. That is I believe, the greatest state of human existence. And I am just so overjoyed that I'm in this business of church capital campaigns, because I get to experience it every single day. So I'm very grateful that I get to be part of this. If I can help you in your church capital campaign, please let me know. The information's at the end. You call me or email me anytime. This is my life, and I know I'm a nerd, but it is my greatest sense of joy. Okay, so now as we wrap this up, so we just talked about a summary about how to increase your weekly offertory before your church capital campaign. We covered these 5 points. Do it now because you're going to raise more money in your capital campaign. Number 2, begin a gigantic flow of information. And now we've got people on our staff who can help you prepare brochures like this and annual reports, but you've also got to do social media. You've got to put it on your website. It's got to be on Facebook, got to be on Instagram, all those things. Got to really significant flow of information going out, and attached to every one of those communications out has got to be number 3, thank you, the gratitude, and let people know how grateful you are that they've been part of this magnificent impact on improving people's lives. And number 4, you've got to engage people. Do it starting right this minute. Ask their opinion. Do town hall meetings, do surveys, ask people in person, find 1,000 ways to do the engagement. And then number 5, take a step out and seek to inspire people. And your best way to do that is probably using volunteers as speakers. Now, it's important that you move into action right now if you're going to prepare for a church capital campaign. And these 5 steps are the way to do that. The engaging your leaders right now, your parish council, finance council, that people who help think through, just connect with them right now. Bring it up in a meeting and ask for their input. Then number 2, you got to gather lots of information. You know, if we need a new building, what's it going to cost? How many square feet? What's the timeline? You got to, number 3, build a lot of consensus. Find ways to have town hall meetings over and over and over again. Number 4, conduct a feasibility study, because this will tell you, can we do this? And if so, how much is it going to cost? Number 5, communicate. We talked about that a lot, and begin leaping into action right now. Now, if I can help you, call me and we can help chart out a plan for you to get ready. It doesn't cost anything, doesn't take very long, but I'd happily volunteer to do that. In bonus, now's a good time. There is a lot of evidence of a significant increase in giving. Last year, Giving Tuesday was up by 9%. Overall giving is up to $470 billion. Foundation giving's up 19%. The number of millionaires has increased to 8.8%. The giving pyramid has changed from 80-20 to 90-10. So you're going to have a lot more leadership gifts. Just in the past year, we've had kind of an explosion of unsolicited $100,000 gifts. It is just remarkable, the number of gifts that have come in from left field. So be ready, willing, and able to accept those and encourage those. We really want to encourage non-cash gifts. We want gifts of assets, gifts of stock, gifts of things that are appreciated. Those are tremendous tax benefits to the donors. Now, I've got other resources I can give you for free. I can connect you to a visioning facilitator if you need consensus building expertise. She doesn't charge anything for an introductory discussion. I've got a magnificent church builder who can knock out estimates in a heartbeat and is happy to do it. I've got a church loan expert I can direct you to, and she is brilliant and asks 2 or 3 questions and right away can tell you what to expect, cost you nothing, and I'm number 4, the Church Capital Campaign Consultant. If you call me and ask my opinion, I'll tell you, I think you can raise this. It'll cost you that, and you can increase your annual giving by this. So you can probably raise that in planned gifts as well. So I've got all those resources for you. Give me a call. There's my phone number. Or send me an email. This is my life, and it is my joy. Thank you so much for joining me today in this capital campaign. We exist just to help you with your capital campaign. So don't hesitate to call. Thank you so much. Go forth. Good luck, and God bless. Bye-bye.